Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are sharing a rare glimpse of their kids as they celebrate the holidays. The couple has unveiled their 2024 holiday card, which features 6 images. Among the pics is one of their entire family.
What if Meghan Markle's most powerful moments were the ones where she said nothing at all? From the royal wedding aisle to her final walk at Windsor, every smile, pause, and sideways glance has been decoded by experts, and the truth they've uncovered is far more revealing than words. Did Meghan quietly push back against palace expectations from day one? What did her body language reveal during the most emotional days of her royal journey? And how much did she actually say without ever opening her mouth? Let's answer all these questions in detail. It was supposed to be the perfect royal moment. On the morning of May 19, 2018, the world turned its gaze to St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, where Meghan Markle was set to marry Prince Harry. The air outside was filled with anticipation, thousands lining the streets, while millions watched from around the globe. But inside the stone walls of the chapel, something more nuanced was unfolding, something that only a trained eye could fully grasp. As Meghan stepped out of the car, all eyes were on her. She walked alone, a departure from tradition, until joined by Prince Charles down the aisle. Meghan's expression, calm and seemingly joyful, never faltered. Her smile, soft and symmetrical, appeared effortless. But body language expert Judy James later pointed out that it wasn't just a smile, it was something closer to a performance. She described it as the doe-eyed Disney princess expression. According to James, Meghan's smile rarely left her face, even in the most solemn moments. Her posture was upright, shoulders relaxed, and her steps confident, elements that suggested someone who was not just prepared, but fully in control. Prince Harry, by contrast, showed signs of tension almost from the beginning. Observers noted his repeated hand-wringing, lip-licking, and adjustments to his military uniform. These were not random movements, they were textbook stress indicators. Judy James remarked that he appeared shocked and overwhelmed, as if the reality of the occasion had only just begun to sink in. While Meghan maintained eye contact with guests and cameras alike, Harry seemed to retreat inward, caught in a loop of nervous energy. But in between those carefully orchestrated vows and curated glances, subtle exchanges hinted at deeper dynamics. At one point, Meghan leaned slightly toward Harry, her hand brushing his. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't flashy. It was, as some experts noted, an attempt to ground him. Harry responded with a brief nod, his body shifting closer. Even in one of the most publicized moments of their lives, their instinct was to seek each other's presence, not as royals, but as people. Then came the carriage procession. As they emerged from the chapel and were greeted by roaring crowds, Meghan remained composed. Her wave was deliberate but not overdone. Her chin remained level, signaling confidence. Harry sat slightly turned toward her, his shoulders still visibly tense but beginning to settle. Bianca Cobb, another body language analyst, commented that Meghan's eye movements during the ride were telling. Rather than scanning the crowd aimlessly, she frequently locked eyes with individuals, acknowledging them. This wasn't a performance, it was an engagement. By the time they arrived at Buckingham Palace for the post-wedding garden party, a visible shift had taken place. Harry, now more relaxed, was seen initiating conversation with guests, smiling more freely. Meghan stayed close, but let him lead. Judy James noted that Harry's transition into what she called a more alpha role indicated he was regaining his footing. He stood taller, gestured more broadly, and mirrored Meghan's supportive gestures with his own. These subtle interactions, small glances, mirrored steps, matching hand placements, spoke volumes about their rapport. This moment marked more than a change in posture. It marked a pivot in their public dynamic. For months prior, Meghan had been the poised newcomer stepping into a centuries-old institution. Now, post-vows, her role had shifted. She wasn't just adapting to the royal world, she was actively shaping it. Her body language suggested not just confidence, but influence. Still, none of this existed in a vacuum. For comparison, observers often reference Kate Middleton's wedding to Prince William in 2011. Kate, more reserved in expression and motion, kept gestures minimal and facial expressions neutral. In contrast, Meghan projected warmth and visibility. While both were calculated, the contrast reflected not only personality, but cultural background and media framing. Yet even as Meghan and Harry presented a united front, trained eyes could see where the stress seeped through. During the reception, Meghan was seen briefly touching her stomach, a classic self-soothing gesture. Her shoulders, though generally relaxed, occasionally tensed as she nodded at unfamiliar faces. And while her smile rarely faded, it sometimes tightened, subtly enough that it could pass unnoticed, but clear to an expert. None of these behaviors implied insincerity. Instead, they painted a picture of someone balancing personal joy with public expectation. Meghan had trained for visibility, first in acting, then through intense royal coaching. But even with that background, the pressures of that day were unlike anything she had faced before. And her body language, while polished, occasionally betrayed the human beneath the image. As the day drew to a close, one final moment lingered with analysts. During their final wave from the palace balcony, Meghan stepped slightly behind Harry, allowing him to take the front. A generous gesture? Or a carefully rehearsed move? Experts differ. But Judy James believed it was intentional, a way of signaling that while she might shine, she understood the hierarchy she was stepping into. Still, others interpreted it differently. It wasn't submission, they argued, it was strategy. Meghan knew the cameras would capture that moment for decades to come. By letting Harry lead, she played into royal tradition while quietly communicating her understanding of optics. In the days and weeks after the wedding, the photographs would be endlessly analyzed. Some praised Meghan's composure, others criticized it as too calculated. But what was clear to those who studied the footage frame by frame was this: every nod, smile, and wave had layers, and not all of them were as cheerful as they seemed. As their honeymoon period gave way to daily royal duties, that tightly managed image would be tested. The composure of the wedding day was not an endpoint, it was a starting point. Because in the months that followed, the body language of the Duchess of Sussex would be scrutinized more than any other royal in recent history. In the weeks after the wedding, the image of Meghan Markle as a confident, composed royal seemed firmly established. But as she transitioned from newlywed to working duchess, the subtle cues in her body language began to shift. Her first solo royal engagement in September 2018 at the Royal Academy of Arts in London was meant to cement her public role. Meghan stepped out in a sleek black Givenchy dress, smiling for cameras, walking with the same posture she'd shown at the chapel. But experts noticed something slightly different this time. There was an added formality to her stance, a tighter grip on her clutch bag, and brief flashes of micro-expressions, quick, fleeting changes in her face that suggested internal tension beneath the polished surface. Body language analysts pointed out that Meghan's confidence was still present, but it was now mixed with moments of cautious restraint. During her interactions with museum staff and guests, her gestures were expressive, yet her smile occasionally faded as she listened. This wasn't a failure of composure. It was, perhaps, an early glimpse of the emotional toll that would come with constant public scrutiny. As her schedule filled with walkabouts, patron visits, and official speeches, Meghan continued to present a poised front. But the spotlight grew harsher. Paparazzi photos were dissected, headlines interpreted every facial twitch, and online speculation about her mannerisms became relentless. During a charity cookery event for the Hub Community Kitchen, Meghan appeared genuinely engaged, laughing, gesturing warmly, embracing participants. Yet one clip from that day was replayed dozens of times, a moment where she adjusted her hair mid-conversation while looking down. Some interpreted it as nervousness. Others saw it as a sign of distancing. For experts, it was a classic example of a self-soothing gesture, subtle, automatic, and deeply human. Those who compared Meghan to other royals often looked to Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Catherine's body language had been studied for years, and was widely described as composed but reserved. Meghan's style was more open, with wider smiles, animated expressions, and frequent hand gestures. But these differences became a talking point, not just in the press, but in how the public perceived her place in the royal family. The media attention intensified after Meghan's pregnancy was announced in October 2018. During a royal tour of Australia, Fiji, Tonga, and New Zealand, Meghan's growing bump and glowing appearance captured headlines. But body language experts were watching something else. At various events, Meghan was often seen placing both hands on her stomach, a gesture some interpreted as maternal pride, while others labeled it as performative. Meghan herself later said it was instinctive, a way to connect with her unborn child. But in those months, every move was analyzed with a level of scrutiny rarely applied to other members of the family. During this tour, Harry's body language also shifted. In earlier appearances, he had often appeared protective, frequently placing a hand on Meghan's back, guiding her gently. Now, analysts noted that their gestures were more synchronized. When Meghan reached for his hand, he met it. When she leaned in, he responded. The chemistry was still present, but there was also a visible effort to present unity in the face of media storms brewing back home. By early 2019, tensions behind the scenes had begun to leak into public view. Reports of staff turnover, disagreements over protocol, and rumors of a rift between Meghan and Catherine created an atmosphere of discomfort. At a Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey in March, body language experts observed a noticeable chill between the couples. Meghan and Harry entered first, followed later by Catherine and Prince William. During the service, Meghan was photographed smiling politely, but her jaw was slightly clenched and her shoulders drawn up more than usual. Catherine remained composed, with minimal movement. The absence of eye contact and limited interaction between the couples added fuel to ongoing speculation. Later that spring, when Meghan and Harry introduced their newborn son Archie to the world, it was meant to be a joyful moment. The event was brief, just a few minutes in front of a small group of reporters. Meghan, dressed in white, beamed as she held the baby in her arms. But experts noted that her posture was more rigid than expected. Her left hand gripped her right wrist in a gesture of restraint, while her smile, though genuine, flickered at moments. Harry stood close, his body angled protectively toward both Meghan and Archie. Together they presented a united front. But the strain of media intrusion, according to analysts, was beginning to show. What made this period particularly interesting to body language specialists was how Meghan responded in unscripted moments. During a visit to a market in Fiji, where she had to be escorted out early due to security concerns, her expression changed visibly. Her eyes darted, her stride quickened, and her mouth tightened. In that split second, the mask of calm cracked, not out of failure, but out of instinct. She was still adapting to the realities of royal life, and the burden of being constantly watched was growing heavier. Throughout the second half of 2019, the couple's appearances became less frequent. When they did step out, there was often a noticeable tension. At the Well Child Awards in October, Meghan delivered an emotional speech, tearing up as she spoke about motherhood. Experts noted how she held her hand to her chest, tilted her head downward, and blinked rapidly to hold back tears. These were authentic signs of emotional vulnerability, not performance, but a release. Her composure had not disappeared, but it had softened. The culmination of this emotional arc came during their final royal engagements in early 2020. At the Commonwealth Day service in March, their last major public appearance before stepping back from royal duties, the tension was unmistakable. Meghan wore a striking green dress and maintained perfect posture throughout the ceremony. But footage showed her offering a polite nod to Catherine, who did not return the gesture. Body language experts called it a civil but cold encounter. Meghan's smile, once bright and expressive, was now fixed, her jaw slightly set. It wasn't anger, it was resolve. From the wedding aisle to Westminster Abbey, the journey had transformed her. The openness of her early days had been shaped by criticism, expectations, and the need to constantly manage perception. Meghan had not abandoned her authenticity. She had adjusted it for survival. The public still saw smiles, waves, and polished speeches, but the experts, watching closely, saw the flickers of fatigue, the clenching of fingers, the guarded eye movements. These weren't contradictions, they were layers. And they told the story of a woman navigating one of the most visible roles in the world, under pressure few could truly comprehend. By the time Meghan Markle and Prince Harry sat down with Oprah Winfrey in March 2021, the body language they had once used to communicate silent strength had taken on a new purpose: defense. The interview, broadcast around the world, wasn't just a conversation. It was a turning point. For the first time, the couple publicly shared the emotional weight of their experiences inside the royal institution. And while their words carried impact, experts studying their nonverbal cues saw just as much in what was not being said. From the moment Meghan appeared on screen, her body language struck a careful balance between composed and protective. Dressed in a black Giorgio Armani dress with lotus blossom detailing, she sat upright, hands folded across her lap, knees together, and posture refined. But analysts noted her legs were angled slightly away from Oprah, subtle distancing that suggested caution. Her eyes met Oprah's with steadiness, but they occasionally dropped after especially difficult topics were raised. According to body language expert Darren Stanton, this kind of momentary gaze aversion can be a subconscious attempt to manage internal conflict. One of the earliest topics discussed was Meghan's mental health. As she recounted how she felt isolated and unable to get support, her voice remained calm. But she tightened her jaw several times, a signal often associated with suppressed emotion. She also touched her abdomen lightly, another self-soothing gesture. Experts noted that while she rarely broke down, her controlled delivery masked a depth of feeling she was clearly trying to keep contained. When the conversation shifted to the royal wedding itself, Meghan recounted the now disputed claim that she and Harry had been married in private 3 days before the public ceremony. While her tone remained sincere, several analysts pointed to a notable shift in her body. She leaned back slightly, avoided direct eye contact, and her blink rate increased. Judy James, a longtime royal body language observer, noted that this combination of behaviors suggested discomfort. While not a confirmation of falsehood, these signs are often present when someone is navigating a sensitive or complicated memory. This segment drew particular attention because the claim itself was later clarified by official sources. The Archbishop of Canterbury confirmed that no legal wedding had taken place before the formal event on May 19, 2018. For experts, this made Meghan's nonverbal cues all the more interesting. Her delivery was not aggressive or defensive, but it was guarded. Her expressions, posture, and tone didn't suggest deception in the conventional sense, but rather emotional distance from the timeline, which may have blurred over time. As Meghan moved on to the topic of conversations within the family about her son's skin tone, her entire demeanor shifted. Her body stiffened, her hands clasped tighter, and her breathing deepened. These signs are often associated with someone preparing for an emotional impact. Meghan's voice slowed and became more deliberate, while her eyes briefly narrowed, a moment that Judy James described as an emotional punctuation mark. It was clear that she was choosing her words with great care, aware of the weight they would carry. Harry's entrance partway through the interview marked another tonal shift. When he joined the conversation, his body language was noticeably different from Meghan's. He leaned forward more often, his hands gestured frequently, and he showed a visible desire to be heard. But even in his openness, there were signs of tension. He touched his wedding ring repeatedly, a classic self-reassurance behavior. When speaking about his father and brother, he looked down and to the side, another possible indicator of internal stress. Throughout the interview, Meghan and Harry often mirrored each other's body language. When Meghan crossed her legs, Harry followed. When Harry leaned in, Meghan did the same. This synchronization, known as mirroring, is generally seen between people who are emotionally aligned and supportive of one another. Analysts saw this as an authentic display of connection amid a highly charged setting. When asked directly whether she had made Catherine cry, Meghan's reply was firm. She corrected the story, saying it had been the reverse. Her face stayed composed, but she briefly pressed her lips together before responding, a signal that can indicate restrained irritation. Meghan emphasized that she wasn't trying to disparage Catherine, but simply wanted the record corrected. Experts noted that while she seemed in control, the moment clearly touched a nerve. Her hand movements became more animated, and her voice for just a moment rose in pitch. In contrast to Meghan's refined control, Harry appeared more emotionally exposed. His breathing was heavier, his jaw clenched more visibly, and his speech occasionally stumbled. Body language analysts pointed to these signs as expressions of emotional conflict, especially when he discussed the lack of support they received from the institution. When referencing the moment they decided to step back, Harry's posture shifted. He leaned back, arms crossed for a moment, before unfolding them slowly. The motion was interpreted as symbolic, closing off, then opening up to the public narrative. Even in more positive segments, such as their excitement about their second child, Meghan's hands rested protectively on her stomach, and Harry reached for her hand more than once. These gestures were seen not just as affection, but reassurance. They were a couple under pressure, finding comfort in each other during a moment where every word, every movement would be analyzed. What made this interview especially powerful for body language experts wasn't any one moment. It was the consistency of controlled emotion under duress, and the signals of a couple trying to speak freely within an invisible frame. They didn't explode in anger. They didn't collapse into tears. But their tension showed through in every tightly held hand, every quick breath, and every diverted gaze. Critics questioned the accuracy of some of their claims, but few doubted the sincerity of their distress. Analysts emphasized that while body language cannot confirm truth, it can reflect internal experience. And in Meghan's case, the balance between her calm voice and her subtly defensive posture revealed someone carefully managing the line between openness and self-preservation. After the Oprah interview, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry began a new chapter far from the formal protocols of palace life. But even outside royal walls, the cameras kept rolling, and the body language remained under just as much scrutiny. From public appearances at charity events to major speeches and television specials, Meghan's presence continued to draw analysis, not just for what she said, but how she carried herself in moments that were still shaped by history, tension, and perception. At the Global Citizen Live event in New York City in September 2021, Meghan stood before a cheering crowd in Central Park. It was her first major in-person appearance since the interview. She wore a structured Valentino mini dress with floral embellishments, holding Harry's hand as they walked on stage. Her movements were fluid, her voice confident, and her eye contact steady. According to body language expert Blanca Cobb, Meghan's pacing and posture suggested both purpose and preparation. She stood squarely on both feet, a stance used by speakers who want to project strength and sincerity. But what caught the attention of some analysts was her subtle forward-leaning posture, a technique often used to signal urgency and emotional engagement. Throughout her speech, Meghan used her hands for emphasis, forming soft, open-palm gestures as she addressed the issue of vaccine equity. These hand movements, palms facing the audience, fingers relaxed, indicated a desire to be seen as open and cooperative. But during Harry's segment, observers noted something different. Meghan stood beside him, smiling occasionally, but keeping her hands clasped in front of her. Judy James observed that this was not an act of submission, but of attentiveness. Meghan, she argued, was stepping into a more supportive role in that moment, visibly present, but not dominating. However, not all appearances went without criticism. At the Invictus Games in The Hague in April 2022, Meghan introduced Harry with what was widely seen as a heartfelt speech. She reached for his hand, smiled warmly, and placed a hand on his back as he stepped forward. Critics, however, interpreted these gestures as over-rehearsed or controlling. Body language experts offered a more nuanced take. They noted that while Meghan did direct much of the attention, her gestures were consistent with what she had shown throughout their public relationship, supportive, physically affirming, and intentionally connected. This consistency was also visible during interviews, such as their December 2022 Netflix documentary series. In behind-the-scenes clips, Meghan was often shown guiding conversations, leaning in when she spoke, and using direct eye contact. Her tone was calm but deliberate. Experts like Mark Bowden noted that this deliberate pace and tone choice was a method of controlling the conversation environment, a strategy often used in high-stakes interviews. In group settings, Meghan frequently nodded as others spoke, a gesture associated with active listening and validation. But her eye movements were also tracked closely. Occasional downward glances or delayed responses were interpreted by some as signs of internal calculation. Harry, on the other hand, showed more signs of emotional wear. During moments of vulnerability, particularly when discussing the death of Princess Diana or the couple's departure from the UK, his posture would shift inward. He rubbed his hands together, clasped them in front of him, or folded his arms slightly. These are gestures that analysts like Darren Stanton associate with self-comfort or internal stress processing. Meghan, meanwhile, often reached for his hand during such moments, maintaining the pattern of physical grounding that had become a constant between them. In public engagements following the Queen's passing in September 2022, the couple made their way back to the UK for a series of solemn appearances. One of the most scrutinized was the walkabout at Windsor with Prince William and Catherine. Meghan's body language during this appearance was notably restrained. She wore a somber expression, kept her hands in front of her, and maintained a respectful distance from both the crowd and the other royals. Experts observed that she made an effort to blend into the protocol, stepping back when Catherine greeted mourners and staying aligned with Harry's cues. This particular moment reminded some analysts of Meghan's early appearances with the royal family, where her gestures were more reserved, her expressions more measured. It was interpreted as an intentional return to formality, in line with the mood and symbolism of mourning. But even in these quiet moments, subtle exchanges stood out. Meghan glanced toward Harry often, occasionally adjusted her grip on his hand, and once briefly tilted her head in his direction, a soft, personal gesture in an otherwise restrained setting. The dynamic between Meghan and Harry remained closely studied through their business and advocacy work. Whether appearing on stage at a United Nations panel or in videos for their Archewell Foundation, Meghan often assumed the role of lead speaker. She introduced topics, framed discussions, and maintained direct eye contact with the camera. Analysts like Jesus Enrique Rosas noted that while Meghan's confidence had always been part of her public persona, the frequency with which she led conversations, even when Harry was seated beside her, suggested a deliberate balance of power. One particularly discussed moment came in a video clip where Meghan and Harry appeared on a joint panel, seated side by side. As Harry began to answer a question, Meghan looked toward him, smiled gently, and placed a hand on his forearm. It was a subtle moment, but one that sparked debate. Some saw it as an act of encouragement. Others viewed it as a signal of control. Experts argued that context mattered. Throughout the session, both Meghan and Harry had exchanged supportive gestures. The touch wasn't dominance, they concluded. It was routine, familiar, and reflective of their established communication pattern. What becomes clear across all these moments is that Meghan's body language has evolved, but not changed dramatically. From her early royal engagements to her current public appearances, she continues to project composure, calculated engagement, and emotional alignment with Harry. She uses proximity, touch, and mirroring to convey support. But she also uses posture, pace, and gesture to signal authority. For body language experts, the lasting question is not whether Meghan is confident or strategic. Most agree that she is both. The more important question is why these traits continue to divide opinion. Her expressive hand gestures, her tendency to lead conversations, and even the way she smiles are often interpreted through the lens of cultural expectations, gender roles, and the enduring tension between modern celebrity and traditional royalty. By 2025, Meghan Markle is no longer a working royal, but she is still very much in the public eye. And her body language remains a subject of fascination, not because it reveals secrets, but because it reflects the same thing it always has: a woman balancing visibility and vulnerability in full view of the world. Every step forward, every glance, every pause carries history. And for those watching closely, it's never just about what she says. It's about how she chooses to say it. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.